It was a stormy night at Pineview Hostel, a secluded college dormitory nestled deep within a dense forest. The hostel had a notorious reputation among the students for its eerie ambience, but Jack and Mark, two roommates who had been staying there for months, had never experienced anything out of the ordinary. Until that fateful night. As the clock struck midnight, a loud clap of thunder shook the windows of their dimly lit room. The rain beat relentlessly against the roof, creating a discordant symphony that seemed to echo through the dark corridors. The boys, Jack and Mark, lay restless in their creaky beds, their stomachs growling louder with each passing moment. Unable to ignore their cravings any longer, Jack turned to Mark, who was trying to read a book by the faint light of a flickering bulb. "I can't take it anymore," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm starving, and I'm so thirsty." Mark nodded in agreement, his dry throat making it hard to speak. The hostel had strict rules about lights out after midnight, and venturing out into the dark hallways at this hour was unsettling, to say the least. But their hunger and thirst overcame their fear, and they decided to make their way to the canteen. Armed with flashlights and nervously whispered jokes, they quietly left their room and began their journey into the unknown. The hallway was a labyrinth of shadows, and the only sounds were the echo of their footsteps and the occasional rattling of the old pipes. As they reached the canteen, they were greeted by an eerie silence. The once bustling room now felt like a tomb, frozen in time. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered sporadically, casting unsettling shadows across the worn-out chairs and tables. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of foreboding. Approaching the counter cautiously, they found an elderly woman behind it. Her skin was deeply wrinkled, and her eyes appeared hollow, as if they had witnessed unspeakable horrors. She moved slowly, her bony fingers trembling as she handed them a faded menu. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a hoarse whisper that barely reached their ears. Jack and Mark ordered 2 sandwiches and 2 sodas, their hunger and thirst making them impatient. As they waited for their food, they couldn't help but notice the unusual paintings on the walls. The images depicted haunting scenes of people lost in a thick, dark forest, their faces etched with fear, and shadowy figures lurking in the background. Unease washed over them, but they dismissed it as a product of their tired minds in the late hour. When their food finally arrived, it looked strangely unappetizing. The sandwiches were soggy, and the sodas tasted flat, offering no relief to their parched throats. They exchanged puzzled glances but decided to eat anyway, their hunger driving them to ignore their misgivings. But with each bite, the taste became more repulsive, and their thirst remained unquenched. The sandwiches seemed to turn to ashes in their mouths, and the sodas did nothing to soothe their dry tongues. Just as they were about to give up and leave, the elderly cashier suddenly spoke, her voice echoing eerily throughout the canteen. "You should never have come here at this hour," she warned, her eyes now glowing an unnatural shade of red. A panic surged through Jack and Mark as they turned to face her, their flashlights trembling in their hands. The frail woman's form began to transform, growing taller and more sinister, her gnarled fingers stretching towards them. In their terror, the room around them seemed to come alive. The ghostly figures from the paintings stepped out of their frames, whispering chilling warnings. Shadows danced menacingly in the corners of the room, and the once silent canteen was filled with haunting voices, whispering secrets of the hostel's dark history. Desperate to escape, Jack and Mark fled toward the exit, but the door slammed shut in front of them with a deafening thud. They were trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. As the malevolent forces closed in, they clutched each other, praying for a miracle. Suddenly, the clock struck 3 a.m., and the hostel's eerie ambience lifted as quickly as it had descended. The old woman returned to her cashier's desk, her eyes returning to their normal state. The paintings returned to their frames, and the shadows retreated to their hiding places. The door swung open, allowing the terrified boys to flee. Back in their room, Jack and Mark tried to make sense of the horrifying experience. Had it all been a nightmare? They couldn't be sure, but they vowed never to visit the hostel canteen after dark again. Till this day, they shudder at the memory of the hostel canteen at midnight, haunted by the chilling warning of the old woman and the sinister secrets hidden within those walls. The storm outside continued to rage, but the true terror, they realized, was not in the howling wind or the pounding rain. It was right there within the Pineview hostel, waiting for those who dared to seek a midnight meal.